everyone, Cadaver Kelly here. Last month was Black History Month, and this month is Disability Awareness Month. In honor of both of these occasions, I have with me fellow goth YouTuber, Jess and King. Jess, thank you for coming on the channel.
Thank you for having me. It's awesome that you're willing to bring those things up. I know not everyone talks about awareness days, but I figure our community as goths is so big. Why not talk about the different awareness months and celebrate the people in the community, you know? So I think that's awesome you're so willing to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Goth is a very diverse community, despite I feel like some of the Hollywood movies depicts goths as being a very specific archetype, but in real life, the goth scene is a very broad and diverse community. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join me today. So I'd like to start off this conversation just with preferred pronouns.
I love that. So my preferred pronouns, despite what the Zoom says, is she, her, hers, but I'm genderqueer. And for those of you who are watching that don't know all the lingo, genderqueer is a non-conforming. So it means that I was born a woman, but I don't feel like I'm just a woman. I feel that I am in between. There's oftentimes when I talk to people and just the mannerisms that I am tend to be a little bit more masculine, that people will say to me, even in person, seeing this, okay, sir, oh, wait, ma'am. So I like to say I'm genderqueer, but she, her, hers, even though an average person walking around doesn't know the difference. What about you?
My pronouns are also she, her, and for anyone who might be watching the channel for the first time on this video, mine are she, her as well. So for those watching who may not have seen your channel yet, tell us about your content and your mission and what you're trying to do over on the Jess and King channel.
I love that you said mission, because let's face it, there is a genre of YouTube where people literally do not have a mission. They turn on a camera and they vlog their day, and that's what they do every single time. Or they turn on the camera and they talk about their consumerism. So they're like, oh, doing a haul or whatever, and that's it. So I kind of like that you even use that word, because I do have a particular mission, but I don't think all YouTubers do. No shade. I'm just saying they don't. So for those of you who don't know what I do, I started this whole channel because I am a goth that is Black. And when I was searching for images, when I was searching for other YouTubers that are Black, that are more experienced, or just a different perspective from a different part of the country or outside the country, I would see people, maybe few videos here and there, but if you consistently looked week after week, the amount of videos and the amount of people were dwindling. And even now, if you search goth in social media, especially Instagram, I just joined the Instagram. It's really bad. Majority of goth is pale skinned people who are obviously Caucasian. So not even tanned Caucasians, or not even light skinned people of color are on there. So that's one of the reasons that I started doing this, to be a reference point. So other people who have my same identities can be like, look, someone else is doing it, I can do it too. Or, oh, I'm not alone because this person's doing it. And in that, I share media, bands, articles that are written, and photo shoots of other Black people to build the experience. Because if we're not represented in the searches, well, hey, I'm going to represent them, so someone out there can actually say that it exists. And I also review Black-owned brand products, because a part of being goth is doing independent, supporting the community. That's my community, so I support it. And finally, because I am disabled and it does impact how often I can upload, how often I talk to y'all, sometimes even these collaborations get impacted by it. I want y'all to know what's going on, so you don't feel like, why is Jess and King doing this awesome uploading schedule and then she's not doing anything for a month? That's weird. No, it's not weird. I'm just funky. So that's all I do.
Well, that is awesome. That's really important work and creating that representation. You're right. There is a little bit of a void in goth social media spaces. The people who are out there making that content, love that you're putting in the time and work to do that, because I think that probably makes it less intimidating for other people who maybe don't feel like they fit that stereotypical archetype to get involved. So that's really awesome what you're doing over there on the channel. I'd love to hear more about your own personal experiences. So how did you first discover goth, or how did you first start getting into goth?
It's a really weird thing because my mom is someone that likes trends. So when it comes to music, she, before the internet, loved listening to the radio. And when music was on TV, after MTV and all that, she loved looking at TV. And she loves singing along to the songs and stuff that are popular. And as it changes based on, the old school media curating what the next thing is, she would be into that. So even though she's in her 60s, when Justin Timberlake came out, she loved and listened to that, even though that person's way younger than her. And the audience of fans, probably not people in their 50s, but there she was, because she likes being a part of the new thing. So it's weird knowing that about my mom, but she was the one that had a CD that had literally my either second or my third favorite song from my favoriteest band, New Order, Bizarre Love Triangle, but the remix, the long extended version, the 6 minute. I never say that the short version is real. It's all about the extended version of that song. So I don't know, maybe that was popular at one point, but she played that a lot growing up, and I liked that. And I was probably in elementary or middle school. So I was way too young, especially before the internet, to know that is actually a goth band. It's a band that does synth pop, and whatever the haters say, I include synth pop into the subculture, the subgenre of goth music. So technically, that's how I got into it, even though it took me a while to actually get the names, the titles, and the community, because it was just one song I would hear. And from there, I think the next thing that really got me into it was those advertising. Now that's the 80s, or I love the 70s on TV, on Nickelodeon at night. They had this one, and I can't find it online. I keep looking to see if people have that, because I know people record old advertisements where they would play, I think they did A Flock of Seagulls, I Ran So Far Away. They did Too Shy Shy. I think they also did Always Something There to Remind Me Of. They had a bunch of the hits that they compiled on there. And I just liked the music again. And again, this was before I was in high school. This was before I had the internet. And I grew up in the suburbs. There was no way, no advertising of goth clubs here. There was no people that looked goth in the 90s or in the suburb. Wherever my folks took me were very mainstream. I did not have access to goth until the internet. So I wouldn't know what goth was until the internet opened up the alternative avenue that was not in my physical real life awareness. So it was kind of, I think it's a little weird because these are all little tidbits, but they aren't the real deal. But that is really how it got interested for me.
I love that your gateway or your entry point was New Order. New Order definitely has a special place in my heart as well. And to your point about synth pop, I, as an underground music journalist, I do cover synth pop as one of my core genres. So it's not as a music genre considered goth, but it's very much in the goth community and in the goth spaces and well loved by goths. So like synth pop, it is really relevant, like doorway into the scene. And it's very important. Also one of my favorite genres, like synth pop, new wave, love Flock of Seagulls, love New Order, all that stuff. That's a really awesome story, and really cool gateway into goth. And that kind of is a good segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is music. We're both very music focused YouTube channels. So I wanted to hear a little more about your music Earworm series and kind of how you started that, what inspired you to start making that series on your channel.
I love that because I think it's a good connection. So as I'm mentioning my whole story, you and other viewers can kind of get the point that growing up in the suburbs, your parents put you in the suburbs for good schools and all of that. There's no way to find alternative things, especially if you don't have a car, especially if your folks are very helicopter parents. There really isn't a way to find it out, because people before the internet found it out by flyers, by stumbling across people that looked different than you, dressed different than you, maybe being good enough to find some indie band playing at a coffee shop or something like that. Places where they had those live venues for open nights. Well, my place didn't have that. And so the only way that I would be able to find that is having access to something outside of where I lived, which is where the internet comes in. And so with that, I mentioned just now the ones I heard were the top hits. And then when social media came and I was expanding my list of artists, my list of albums, my list of songs that I've heard, I noticed that on social media where I found the people, I was seeing again a certain curated list of people talking over and over and over again. It was an echo chamber of people that are talking about Susie Sue and the Banshees, The Cure, Susie and the Banshees. Just, I can probably list a few others, but I'm not going to keep it long. People only list maybe, I think, 5 bands, not going to lie.
Yeah.
I think that 5 bands are listed over and over again when people talk about the music. And that not only was annoying to me, it was boring, and it doesn't help expand it. And even when I was able to go to the clubs where I live in Houston for a little bit before my disabilities got bad, I was hearing kind of the same songs being played in person before Corona. And I don't know about you, I don't like that. I like variety in my life.
Yeah.
And if you're someone that doesn't know anything, how can you find variety if you're only being presented with certain options? So I took it upon myself to start typing in different bands on streaming. I get my music by streaming. I know not everyone doesn't, but I started finding different bands in streaming and then press shuffle, then press radio. So I can actually learn something different than the 5 bands that keep getting talked about. And then I thought to myself, if I'm like this, I know I'm not the only one. Maybe people want to learn about bands that aren't the top ones. Maybe people want to learn about something that's a bit more obscure, or if it's not obscure, things people forget to mention. So that's why I did my music Earworm playlist, because I think it's important to showcase the stuff people aren't talking about. Number 1, for visibility. Number 2, as you said, you promote the smaller bands that have less marketing, that have less team behind them, that are very small, and you help project them so people know about these ones, so people can give them a chance. Well, I want to do that too. So I think it's really awesome, because no offense to the people that do this, I feel like there was a saturation point. And for me, the saturation point was when I saw that, I forgot what it was, one brand that is in the stores did a goth glam holographic release of makeup brand. And I was just like, I'm done. I'm done with all the goth makeup. I'm done with all the goth clothes. We need to go back to what started it all. What started it all were bands that were going into these hole in the wall things, and their fashion picked up from there. So that's why I am very glad that we're talking, because you also understand the importance of music first.
Absolutely. I love that. And it's funny that you mentioned that Gotho graphic. I think that was Wet and Wild that did that
Yes.
line.
Yes.
I have another goth YouTuber friend in the scene, Skull Girdle, who just ranted on and on about that Gotho graphic line. So she was also not too thrilled with it. But I love that. I love that you also share in that mission of wanting to promote more independent or obscure music and help to let that independent art reach a broader audience. It's really important. And I think that now with the internet, there is more of an opportunity for independent artists to be able to promote and produce their own work. But it also has made this sea of competition as well. So it can be hard for independent artists to stand out. So it's kind of a double-edged sword where it's, before independent artists didn't really even stand a chance before the internet and all these things. But now it's also created this huge market where they can get kind of lost in the sea of all these new releases on Bandcamp and on YouTube and across social media. So it's great to see goths are starting to get more involved on social media to share and promote music, because as a community, we can uplift those independent artists and help to share and spread that music. It's good for the subculture. It's good for the overall community.
I want to also bring up this point with you, since you're someone that writes about it. I haven't written about it yet. I've just done videos. That from my perspective as well, we talked about synth pop. I also feel, on the contrast of only 5 bands, that sometimes people with bigger voices are a bit restrictive on what they consider is a part of the music and isn't a part of the music. And the other thing that I do with the Earworm series is I've mentioned a few bands that people know about, but they think that they're like very mainstream, where they leave off the, hey, this is a part of our subculture too. So not only am I bringing it back to the music and talking about stuff people usually don't bring up, but I'm also wanting to say, I think that gatekeeping is only so good, and that you need to kind of open up a little bit about your perspective. For example, I did one video where I talked about the Human League, and everyone knows the Human League because they have 1 or 2 songs that are on all the movies. The movies love to use them. They probably have lots of dividend royalty checks. they must be doing good for themselves because of that. And I think for the most part, people leave out the Human League, and people think that the Human League is just a pop band. They don't understand where they came from. And I talk a little bit about where they came from. I think I did a song I showcased from when they were a group instead of just him and the 2 other ladies, because that album before they split off into that was very funky, not like disco funky, but funky as in it had a lot of quirkiness to it. And some of their stuff is still good. I like the album Octopus. I think I mentioned the album Octopus too. It's very techy, and I like that. So I don't know if what your perspective you can share, but I also think it's important to not only talk about the independent bands, but mention that some brands like, Austin, even A Flock of Seagull, people are like, I ran so far away, and Space Age love song, so there must be mainstream. Those are 2 bands where I'm like, no, they're a part of our genre. Please do not gatekeep. Please do not kick them out. I think it's important to talk that just because a band has some top song doesn't take them away. Also, Men Without Hats. Those 3. What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I think those are like kind of in the new wave synth pop territory, or love songs a little more like for the Cure, you know, like new wave pop, post punk. And the thing with music is that it's very fluid. And the thing with like genre classification, there's a lot of things that are helpful with classifying genres, especially like, you know, I work in the underground music scene. So for people who are like DJs, promoters, or even just massive music fans and collectors, it's helpful to be able to catalog your music and group them by similar sounds, so you can kind of find more music that is like within the stuff that you like. And that's, you know, it's very helpful in those ways. But at the same time, it can also be limiting when you get too strict for it, because I see independent artists who maybe won't experiment with their sound as much as they want to, because they're afraid of straying too much from their like target genre audience. And I think that's kind of sad. And when it comes to goth music, there's kind of for like categorizing what is or isn't goth, there's two sides of that coin. First, there's like music genre, which is just strictly like sonically what it sounds like, the instrumental elements and stuff. As a music genre, there's lots of music within our scene that doesn't quite fit that like genre mold, like where it doesn't have like, you know, minor scale or minor descending scale, the bass line driven, and a lot of those elements that are considered what makes the goth genre sound what it is. But there's a lot of music and artists that are culturally relevant to the goth scene. Maybe they don't exactly fit that mold. Sometimes I use the term goth adjacent to describe some of these bands that are like the New Order or a Flock of Seagulls, like new wave, maybe post-punk that isn't like the darker side of post-punk, where it's like, okay, this band is not from a technical like music perspective like the goth genre, but they're very much loved by the goth community. They're in our spaces, they're played in our clubs, they're sometimes a lot of people's gateway into goth. So I think that, you know, these goth adjacent bands and music are still very important to the goth scene. So I wouldn't want someone to be like shut down because they love new wave and it doesn't have that, like, you know, Sisters of Mercy, very like dark bassline driven sound. It's like they're gonna play if your favorite band's a new wave band or a synth pop band, they're gonna play it at your local goth club. You can come to your goth club and like hang out with the other goths and bond over these bands. It's very much like a culturally relevant and bonding thing. So I think people get too much into this like cut and dry or binary thinking of like it's goth or it's not goth, when really there's like fluidity in music genre and experimentation, and what fits a certain music genre versus like what is culturally relevant to the goth scene as a whole.
My thing is this, is that the one that everybody shits bricks over about House and Peter Murphy, he loved reggae. Reggae has nothing to do with goth at all. But you will see in his songs, it will have the sound of it in there, but a darker version. It will have the rhythm of it. And even every now and then he will have the rhythm in his vocals with it. So if the father of goth, Bauhaus, is into reggae, who are you to say that this song that checks off thematically goth, thematically, musically, has a goth darker sound, has playing with tech, has playing with rhythm, has experimenting with instruments like the good old saxophone? What makes you think that you can say no to that? That I like to bring that into perspective, because I think that people forget that the ones that people love have stuff that is definitely not always dark.
Yeah. And well, the thing with music too is that there's gray area, even if you are going to, like, if you want to specifically classify what is this genre from a sound perspective, there's no exact formula of it needs this exact key signature and this exact combination of like bass and drums and whatever to be goth. There is some fluidity there. And I understand like that if you like, you can't completely stray like outside the box and say, like, for example, that I don't know, Taylor Swift is goth. Obviously that there are boundaries, but I think it's more fluid than people like to people debate and nitpick over like these tiny little details that are in my opinion, it's not very productive. It's more about like kind of like consensus in the community is a big thing. Like if a band, for example, one of my favorite bands in the modern scene is Actors. They don't have that dark goth sound. But they have that very like almost like new wave, a very modern take on the kind of like new wave synth pop post-punk sound. And it's not like a traditional goth sound, but goths love Actors and they're in the goth scene. They're playing goth spaces. They're playing alongside goth bands in the small venues, and they're very much culturally relevant and a part of the scene. So it's I think people make the debate very binary when it's a very fluid thing. The music is fluid, genres are fluid, and kind of as you brought up, influence is fluid. Peter Murphy loving reggae, that's an interesting point because in the 1970s in the UK, punks and the reggae musicians were playing in the same venues. And they were kind of like almost like a political protest kind of movement, both of them protesting kind of Margaret Thatcher's England. And they were playing in these same spaces, and the punk artists and the reggae artists were influencing each other. So when post-punk kind of broke out of that punk movement, some of these early post-punk artists do have that like reggae beat or reggae influence. You can hear it. The Cure's first full album released, Three Imaginary Boys, very heavily reggae beat in that music and in that album, and it's present, and you can hear that influence in goth and in some post-punk goth albums. So the power of influence is also important. As someone who's like a music lover and loves like just art in general, I think like that coming together and bonding over like your love of music, whether it falls into a certain genre category or not, is the most important thing. And that's what I find meaningful about goth, is that I can bond with people over shared love of music and of artists and influences. And lots of my goth friends, we bond not just over the bands that do strictly fall into that goth genre category, but we bond over lots of our favorite music and artists and influences. I like to say that goths are a bunch of music nerds. So of course it's not going to be just goth music that we bond over. Like it's lots of music in general, lots of that like artist and music influence.
So you did bring it up, since you love talking about it. I want to hear your take on this as well. You did bring up Actors, and my perspective, I feel that as soon as we hit the 2000s, things got really weird when it came to the new bands that are coming out, because the new bands that are coming out, pop got a lot darker, and alternative rock that's not goth got a lot darker, such as Linkin Park is obviously not goth, but I'm going to bring up Linkin Park because they were one of the more popular rock bands in the media, the old school media, that talked a lot about the darker stuff that people expected underground bands to talk about. Their issues with mental illness, not fitting in, fighting the darkness in their habits, and learning to deal with life in a way that other darker brands talked about. I feel like when we're in the age of Actors, that the genre is so, for me, unclear. Like not even how you said it's fluid. For me, it just feels very unclear, because how pop is now accepting of more alternative bits and pieces than they are now, that I can understand why newbies are confused. And that's also why I like to talk, I guess, a little bit about the older ones, because you can hear the sound and it's easier to depict the difference. And for me, there's a bunch of bands nowadays that don't use the genres that they used to be labeled with, but well, I don't know. Correct me if I'm wrong. I know of actors, I've heard some of their songs. I'm not a huge fan of them. Since I'm not a huge fan of them, my understanding is that they didn't actually use the words post-punk to describe them, or dark wave or anything like that whenever I've seen them on streaming media. So I've always been of the assumption of, yeah, I know that they're goth, but they don't take on the name. For example, one of the bands that I loved before I even knew what the word goth was Metric. And to my understanding, if you know Metric, they're a Canadian-based band, and they are basically a synth pop band. But I don't think they've ever used the words synth pop, but their whole sound, etc., is very 80s. So I'm wondering what your take is on the new genre, or I guess the new 2000s forward decade of music, where people are, but they don't use the words.
Yeah. Well, a little bit of that, like not using the terms or not accepting certain genre labels on the part of the artist. That's kind of always happened, like in the 80s. The classic example that people always make memes of in the goth scene is Andrew Eldritch from the Sisters of Mercy hates being called goth, but the
That's
Sisters
fair.
of Mercy are like probably the gothest sounding band I could think. Like if I was going to think of one of the cookie cutter bands that you kind of described as everyone talks about over and over, and I were to point to one and say that's what goth rock is, like Sisters of Mercy are kind of like the hallmark that like modern like goth rock, a lot of modern goth rock is like based off of. But as far as what's happening with newer music and it being like less clear with the genres, you're definitely right that I think it's hard to classify music as it's happening, because music, it is a creative medium. So there's always going to be innovation happening. And a lot of times we retroactively apply genres to music. I mean, it's been happening since the dawn of popular music in the 20th century. Jazz music, when it first came out, it wasn't called jazz, it was just called popular music. And it kind of got retroactively labeled jazz. Same thing with like blues, pop music itself, or Broadway music is where pop music came from. It started with Broadway, but Broadway music was originally called Tin Pan Alley. So there's like all these like music genres that later on, I think we can look back on what happened with the music movement and kind of sift through it a little easier. But as that innovation's happening, it's harder to take that clear, like look back and see what's going on. And that's kind of happened with like goth too. Like in the 70s and early 80s, these artists weren't calling themselves goth, but we can look back on like what happened and how that's like influenced music along the way, and describe and analyze like these music movements a little bit better. But I think it's harder to do that as it's happening, because it's, you know, innovation in real time.
Yeah, I think that totally makes sense, because for me, if I don't know the band, it's really hard for me to say what they are. I'll be like, oh yeah, I like this band, but I will not touch what they are with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, and that's fine. Like a lot of people come to my YouTube channel because I do a lot of like genre classification, and some of the times this is just my opinion. Like there are other people who do what I do where they're classifying genre. I write for Obscura Undead, and Obscura Undead does that a lot too, where they talk about different genre classifications. And even amongst ourselves, we don't always 100% agree on, like, maybe we might say one artist leans a little more dark wave or a little more synth pop, because it is like blending. A lot of this is innovating and blending different sounds together. But you know, I don't think it's necessary for someone to understand music genres or be able to like classify or worry about what categories music like fits into. I think the important part is that people are, you know, supporting artists that they enjoy and having like a good experience, like coming together and bonding over that.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the music is so important. I think that's why it's really cool that both of us do that. Because if you look at any of the documentaries and stuff, a bunch of these people, that's where all of this starts from. People may be like, oh, the literary aspect. I think the literary aspect is there for sure, but I think that the literary aspect only worked when the artists were referencing it because the books were there before, but people weren't really coming together over the books like they were the music.
Yeah. Well, back in the 1800s, when like the Gothic literature was like a lot of this Gothic literature was like coming out, it was mainstream culture. Like it was mainstream popular. Like a lot of these, like Edgar Allan Poe was mainstream popular. And these the literature and like all these like Gothic movements, of course, goth gets its name from that because that was like an influence. But like when we're talking about like goth as like a modern music subculture or the goth community now, it's that modern music subculture that kind of like started or was kicked off by like the post-punk in the late 70s, early 80s. So I agree 100%. And influences are important, but there's lots of stuff that has influenced the goth subculture. There's lots of stuff that influences like art and music in general. And you can keep going back further and further and take influences all the way back. Like you could probably take a modern like music artist and say like, oh, well, this post-punk artist was influenced by Joy Division, which was influenced by this punk band, which was influenced by this early blues artist who was influenced by this dark classical artist, and take it like, you can kind of take the progression of like influences like very far back, and that stuff is important. But like the modern goth scene or the goth subculture as it exists today is or very much got its start like as a music scene or music movement in 1979, 1980-ish.
Definitely, I agree with that.
So we're talking about music. I've got maybe a little bit of a tough question for you. So you're stranded on a desert island and you can only take 5 albums with you. And it doesn't have to be goth, it can be anything. What 5 music albums do you pick?
I don't think that's really hard. The only issue is that for me, I am a emotion music listener. I don't know. Do you relate to being emotional? Because some people are, they just want to, like I said, there are some people that are genre, there's some people that are artists. I'm literally emotionally motivated to listen to music. So if I'm sad, I want to listen to certain things. If I'm tired, especially because I work from home, thank God, very blessed for that. But working from home means the first 3 hours, I don't want to listen to my favorite bands, New Order or Joy Division. They are a high energy band, and I just woke up. I don't have high energy. So the only problem is stranded on a desert island with 5 albums. Can I figure out 5 albums that are going to fit all my moods? Probably not.
Oh, that's interesting way to think about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna list, of course, my favorite. I'm actually gonna do New Order over Joy Division because their musical catalog's bigger. So I'm gonna do that. Even though my favorite song is Love Will Tear Us Apart, it'll be sad if I can't have that. I think probably down the line somewhere, somehow, they're gonna do a combo collaboration of 20th anniversary, 30th anniversary, whatever the release. I don't think they've done it yet. I haven't seen it, but I would be highly shocked if they didn't ever do a release where they combine those two. So I think I'm good with New Order on there. And then after that, this sounds silly because I haven't really listened to them a lot, but I need Pete Shelley. Pete Shelley is definitely going to be on there because he does Euphoria, he does Love, he does Wacky Wild. So I'm definitely going to have to do that. Gonna have to do some techno. So I'm definitely going to have to do probably it's hard. I want to do Daft Punk or Kraftwerk. Obviously Kraftwerk influenced Daft Punk, but Daft Punk has really influenced a lot of the tech in the future. So I think You know what? I'm gonna do both of those because I'll be happy with New Order, Kraftwerk, and Daft Punk, so I can do the future and the past and the present. Okay, so I'm gonna do this because this person made a lot. I'm gonna say his name wrong because I'm not Italian, but I'm also gonna do Father Giorgio Moroder because he's done almost everything, and he influenced New Order because of the Diana Ross "I Feel Love" is what influenced them. And I know on Twitch, I've learned a lot about him with the Twitch DJ Bracktune, and he did a whole thing on his understanding of music and its progression. And he talked about how "I Feel Love" is a direct reference to Blue Monday. And so I was like, okay, if I get from something from Giorgio, then I can get pretty much any genre that I want. And then especially if I can get all the features he's done, okay, that's pretty good. So if I'm in more of a rock kind of vibe, uh, honestly, it's hard to think of on the spot. I would love to just like do my research and pull up who I listen to on a lot. But I think that I am going to go with okay, so I'm gonna actually go with Roxy Music because they also are the people that influence a lot of people. I know Roxy influenced Susie, so I think that Roxy is gonna be my fifth one. So I think honestly between those, there's a lot of high energy, but there's a lot of low energy. I know New Order and Roxy do a lot of slow stuff too, so I think I'll be set with that, to be honest.
Yeah. Love glam rock. So love your last choice. I love that you said Daft Punk too, because I'm a huge Daft Punk fan. Like Daft Punk was a huge one for me in high school, like coming of age. Yeah, really love your choices. I think that question can tell you a lot about like a person and their influences and stuff. So kind of on that note, what are some of the like non-goth, like totally not goth, like music artists that have been the most impactful on you?
That's a good question, and it really changes. Now, I've done a series called Non-Goth Music That Gets Me Through, and I talk about the artists that like got me through my hard times, got me through my I can't do life anymore because life is too hard. And I wanted to do that because I felt like because I am a music person, talking just about goth is good because we were talking earlier before we recorded about all the drama that is being YouTube and algorithms and errors and all that. And YouTube wants you to be specific. So I am specific on goth because that's what I was okay with doing and that's what I wanted to represent. However, there's more music to me than that, and a way that I could share that because I want these artists to be known by more people is talk about ones that are really important, not just ones I like, but ones that actually are really solid to me. So I think I'm going to go with ones that I mentioned on that. Sarah McLachlan, she got me through a lot of stuff. Natalie Merchant got me through a lot. You'll notice singer-songwriters that are females really emotionally support me. Let me think what else. I've been really like personally lately, I've been really into techno as in technological music, as in because some people don't like EDM. People are like, "Ooh, electronic dance music. That's so newbie," and people that's like all what do people say? People say that EDM is all about dubstep and stuff, which I don't think. I like the words personally EDM more than calling everything techno because I think that for me it's expanding the genre a little bit more. But yeah, I've been really into that lately. Listening to a few songs with Calvin Harris, and I like how he brings a little bit of that like queer 80s vibe to it, even though he's not queer. I heard one of his songs, Promises, that has a lot of good voguing style beats. So you can do cat, 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 and all that. And so I've been really into a lot of those lately.
Very cool. That's another thing I like to ask people about their non-goth music taste in the goth scene, because I think it's also interesting to get that kind of individual perspective on people in goth. Because I think that goths, yeah, we like goth music, we bond over all these things, but goth being a goth doesn't mean that we're like strictly bound to just goth. Like humans are multifaceted, and you kind of like mentioned something to that effect, that like goth is like what you choose to do with your YouTube, but there's like a lot more to you than just goth, and I think most goths feel that way. So and kind of on that note of like people getting into the goth scene, I think it's good to let people know that like if you're a goth, if you're involved in the goth scene, you can love the goth scene, you can be super goth and into all this goth stuff, and you can also have all your other interests too.
I think it's important to be varied because, like you said, I also agree that if you are goth, you are a music fiend, a music lover, or you're a music geek. My folks forced me to do classical music from kindergarten until I graduated in high school. And after I graduated, they still wanted me to do piano and violin. They still wanted me to do all my theory classes. And I really hated that. But I know a little bit more than other people because of that. And I tend to like quirky stuff like Pete Shelley. It plays with rhythms, plays with sound, plays with stuff like that. There's this band no one knows that I covered on my YouTube called New Music, Musik, not C. They're so freaking weird. I think they're kind of like the stuff that darn it, what was the name? Weezer. I really feel like Weezer took their influence from them, but I like quirky stuff. It has to have some sort of weird uniqueness or something because of my background. Like I don't like basic music. And because I like quirky stuff, if you only listen to goth, you're limiting your music vocabulary. You're limiting understanding where they get certain beats, certain rhythms from, and all of that. And it makes you a worse goth, to be honest, in my opinion, because you're not able to fully appreciate what's in front of you. So I think it's important to listen to other music besides goth so you can be a better music geek.
Absolutely. I agree with that as well. I think it's good to have so like some stuff outside of goth to give you better perspective within like goth, and most of the people I know who are like some of the most dedicated in the goth scene, who do a lot of work in the goth scene and like work on the events and music and stuff, they like all kinds of things, they have like all kinds of interests, and being like a big music fanatic in general can really give you a great like perspective on like the goth music. So I love that your channel is very heavily focused on just music in general. It's really great to see that. I wish that just music YouTube in general was a bigger niche than it is. But especially like goth focused channels like that talk about music is very niche. So it's nice to see other channels out there talking about music, other goth channels. So you said that you're based in Austin, right?
I'm in Houston, but we're all in Texas and no one outside of Texas cares. We're all like, rabbit Texas, great Lone Star State. We're going to emancipate and be our own place, y'all. But anyone outside of Texas does not care about us. So I am not offended.
So in Houston, you mentioned like going to the clubs in the past. Do you have a lot of like local events? Are there a lot of events in your local scene?
You're trying to get me in trouble. I've mentioned before that because I am a Black goth, my experience of in-person goth club scenes is different than if I was a Caucasian person. And because of that, I actually am not pleased with my scene. Back when Corona started in 2020 and the Black Lives Matter thing popped up, which is weird. I think people who are uneducated think that the Black Lives Matter started the pro-Black movement because they always bring that up. And I'm like, they're a part of it, but there's some guy named Martin Luther King that y'all love to misquote. Did you forget about him? Like, there was the Black Panther Party. Like, they didn't start it. They're just the new version of it. People like associate if you're pro-Black, that's what you're talking about. And I'm like, no, it's just one thing. But they did the whole thing, and people were doing little Black screens to support, which did nothing. That was all performative, whatever. That there's a bunch of like goth pages and artists that were like Black Lives Matter. I was like, this is so cool because, as I said, if you Google it, it's only pale people. So it's cool that people are bucking the system and they're actually supporting people like me that are in the scene. Well, I waited and I looked around. None of the Houston clubs said it, but I know that some of the Austin clubs did. In fact, I think the church, one of the big ones that people actually outside Texas know, in Dallas, said it. So I'm like, y'all see all this going on, y'all decide not to say anything. And I think I even asked one that people love, which I'm going to mention because I don't care. I've talked about it on my channel before. People all over love numbers, and they're like, numbers is so great. And if you know anything about golf and you know about Texas, you know about numbers. I specifically asked them at one point, what is your take on Black Lives Matter? Because I've been seeing it in the community. They deleted my comment because I checked a few days ago because I don't check my notifications, and it wasn't there anymore. And I mentioned this on my personal page. And I have one of my friends who's Caucasian that's a huge supporter of Black Lives Matter and me and other minorities. And they asked on there too, and their comment got deleted. So I'm like, I don't like you because not only did you not answer the question, you deleting these comments because you don't want to make a stance actually makes you a bad person.
Yeah.
If you said no, it would have been bad. But the fact that you delete it and you don't even want to have the guts to say no makes it worse. So I didn't like that. So I don't promote them because of that. If I get healthy and I can dance again without pain and without flaring up, I don't want to go there. But everyone loves it. Everyone supports it. I think that they had end pop on Instagram, which is anything box come. They have people that are well known that come to the club. So people are all like, oh, they're so amazing. And I'm like, it's good that they bring big goth bands out, but that's not for me because they prove that they aren't here for me.
Yeah.
So my in-person experience, not that great. And that's why I love the internet, because even though I have people that don't support me, tons of people online do. And just because I live in a space that isn't supportive doesn't mean I have to stop being goth. And that's why there's so many stories online that I see. I'm going to just make this tangent that on YouTube, there's a bunch of Caucasian elder goths that talk about how, oh, it's all about finding a flyer. It's all about going in person. And then when you go in person, you make a group of people and y'all party and you're all friends. And that's what's the scene about, man. I'm like, can't relate. When I used to go to the clubs, no one approached me when I was by myself. I would always dance. I'm a dancer, and people wouldn't ever enjoy me. People come in their groups here in Houston. People come in their groups. They talk in their groups. They laugh in their groups. They dance in the groups. If they see people all the time, they say hi and wave to them, but they don't talk to strangers. They don't talk to individuals. So I think that's kind of played out, that it seems like, oh, goth was so cool before the internet because you had your own little niche and everyone was all together. I'm like, for people like me that grew up in the suburbs, goth wouldn't be a thing without the internet. So that's another reason I like to do my channel, because there are still people that live like in the Midwest that don't have the ability to make an offline goth community. There are people like me who are minorities or they're Black that their communities don't support them. And it's so important to know that you don't have to have an offline group of people to be considered goth. You're not less goth because you have to go online to find people to commune with. So I know some people want to skirt the issue and they don't want to name names because it can be like, oh, I called this person out and they didn't like it. Be a better person and I don't have to call you out, is how I say it. So I'm okay with being open about my unfortunate, not great offline experience.
Yeah, no, that's not cool. And I'm very sorry that you had to go through that experience and that your local scene is not supportive of you. And I think that's also very important feedback for anyone who's thinking about starting up an in-person event to keep in mind, is that it's really important to make sure that everyone feels welcome and supported when they come out to events, because you could have very valuable members of the community that aren't participating in your events if they don't feel welcome or if they don't feel like they're supported. And that's, yeah, that is very unfortunate that there are, communities out there that are not being supportive in that way, or not showing up for the people in their own local goth scene in that way. But I do agree with you that there's a number of reasons why someone might not be able to go to in-person events, and online community is very valuable and very important. Some of my most meaningful relationships and experiences in goth have been through online communities. So I do talk a lot about like the in-person stuff and the experiences that I have at events, but I think that's like also a very important point that some of my most meaningful connections and experiences have been through online, and that people can go on and get that sense of community on the internet and find spaces more easily that they do feel supported in, or they feel welcome in. Some people just can't go out because maybe they don't have the money, or maybe they can't physically go out. Maybe some people have kids or family situations where they can't go out. So that like online connection is very important. Do you feel like you've been able to find like a supportive community within goth in online spaces?
Oh, so many of them. And I just want to say, I I feel especially online, like elder goths love to talk about like the offline scene. I just want to tell everyone, take that with a grain of salt. Like, really, if you feel that you aren't a part of it because you haven't found anything offline, or you've never been to the club, like that doesn't make you any less goth at all. We're like Kelly says, we're music geeks. If you are a geek for the music, you are a goth. If you have an online space where you talk about it, you're goth. I think that you can be an individual, but I think that there are so many social media sites and so many ways to connect that there's not a reason for you to be an individual. But I think if you talk about it with anybody, that makes you a goth. And yeah, there's so many Facebook groups to join. There's amazing. There's this one, I guess I might talk about it because we might want to link it as in the post-production, but there's one called, I think, Black/African American Goth, where there's thousands of us and we post our images of our natural hair. I'm wearing a wig just because whenever I dress up in Japanese street fashion that's goth based, I wear wigs because if you have more volume, you can wear these crazy hats and have these poofy things. And with shorter hair, my hair would be covered up by this and it wouldn't have a fuller effect. But you have people with natural hair there. People are starting bands. People are writing books and stuff. Someone just mentioned a book that I didn't even know about that I added to my to buy to read list from there. I think it was called Lust, and it has some cute purple and black background on there. So yeah, I have found awesome groups on Facebook. I found awesome content creators, like so many ones that I've actually showcased for Black History Month on my page. So if you go on my YouTube or you go on my Instagram or my Facebook, you'll see for February, and I started late, so I am still doing it for March until I get caught up with 28 people. that I do celebrate other people. So the online community is lit.
Yeah. And so it's important to remind people that like offline isn't the end all be all of goth. I definitely agree with that. And look at what we're doing right now. We're in completely different states, sitting on Zoom, hanging out, having a conversation about goth and music, and the internet has allowed that to happen. I think especially people who were around for the early days of the scene tend to romanticize the past. Well, we all do that. It's like it's a nostalgia thing. We romanticize the past, but really there's so many meaningful connections and experiences that you can have digitally, and like those channels just keep expanding more and more, whether it's like social media groups or your video communications like Zoom. I know a lot of communities on Discord. There's content creators out there. There's musicians, fantastic musicians who never play a live show in their career, and they're sitting at home playing music, producing music, putting it on Bandcamp or wherever, and it's opened up a whole world to be able to access from home. You don't need to rely on your local scene or in person. Anyone who does have a supportive local scene where they can have great experiences, that it is wonderful, but it's not all that there is out there. And you can be a goth without going anywhere in person. You can enjoy goth and have that sense of community from home.
Speaking of the online community, were you a part of the big goth Twitch movement during Corona?
So I supported a lot of my like DJ friends on Twitch. I did guest DJ a couple streams for my friend, another like DJ and goth person in the Pittsburgh scene, DJ Kelly A. She's fantastic. She has a Twitch channel. Her events are called Moving Shadows. So I've done some guest DJing for her on that. We actually did back in July a really cool stream on Twitch called Goth Around the World, where we played goth music from all continents, or every continent except for Antarctica, obviously. But we played goth music from like every other like continent around the world, all kinds of countries from around the world, and showcase mostly new artists from around the world in that stream. So that was a lot of fun to do that. And I've been doing every month a live talk show. We're kind of like the official r/goth talk show. The admin for r/goth, it's on his Twitch channel. So I co-host that with Dave, the admin of r/goth, and DJ Carnivorous. She's a goth DJ out of Norway. I've done a little bit of stuff with like Twitch since the pandemic.
Yeah, I mean, that's just been another amazing thing. I did a video on it because I'm coming as, again, a geek. I don't do any music stuff. For me, after all the stuff I had to do growing up, I was like, I don't want to touch making any of this and all that. I'll let y'all do that. So I'm not coming from the professional side, kind of like you're in. So I was curious because for me, that the whole goth Twitch during the pandemic is it was a movement. I feel like it still is, but like for me, we already talked about this. We're working full-time jobs and we're doing this and we're doing other stuff. There's no time for it anymore, unfortunately. But so it's still going on, but there's less time to do it. I feel like the movement was another example of why online is just amazing, because I was a part of that. I did go to the 24-hour stream where we went all there. One of the ladies actually was from Japan, and the Japanese lady did one where it was actually rockabilly kind of influenced, where they were
that's awesome.
From the whole 50s kind of vibe. And it was cool because some people, I think there was this the person who put it on, I forget his name. There was a guy with like black hair that was long, and he had glasses, and he has a cat, and I know he was drinking like big bottles of soda that we never see bottles that big in the United States. So it kind of stood out to me. He was talking about how he would, after one group end, he would kind of be like the MC connecting in and be like, oh yeah, well, if y'all don't see that that's goth, like the cramps and all of that. So it is a part of it. It was really, really cool. And I know they've done lots of collabs where they have people that come together to showcase something. And while I was unemployed, it was just like amazing. There was times where you could just turn on, you have your Zoom like here, and some people did all out with like lights and like backdrops and have costumes and stuff. And we just could be jamming together, and you kind of got to know each other too. And it was just so cool. I think to me, it's a phenomenon because it wasn't something that died. It kept going and going and going. And again, it did showcase how we talked about a smaller niche, because I saw recently when I went on Twitch, oh wow, they're recommending someone with thousands of views. I didn't know thousands of views happened on Twitch, because I think the most popular person that I have that is a DJ is DJ Melting Girl from California with a red hair. She has like 300 people in her chat, and her hype chains always go past the fifth one. But that's like the most successful ones, 300, not thousands. And so I wanted to see if you were part of that too, which you obviously were, because I feel like that was kind of like the next level. We had in person, the internet happened, and I truly feel like the whole Twitch movement was elevating the community to a different level of intimacy, a different level of worldwideness, and that the pandemic sucks. All these people dying suck. But out of that, I feel like our community really came together in a way that hasn't come together before. So I know you were mentioning all these other places online where you can find people. I was like, Twitch is where it's at.
Yeah, the Twitch movement is amazing. And you're right. Obviously, the pandemic is horrible tragedy in human history. But what our community did to get through it is really beautiful. What happened with like Twitch, and you can get a lot of that like club experience on Twitch in these DJ streams. You're watching a DJ spin a set. You can hear music that you might not have had exposure to before from the DJ spinning it. And you can chat with other people in the live chat who are also watching it in real time with you. So you get a lot of those benefits that you could get at an offline in-person club, but at home. So it gives people access to that. And for anyone who can't go to an in-person club for whatever reason, you can go onto like these DJ Twitch streams. And there's even sometimes Zoom parties. Like I know DJ Kelly before she went to Twitch, she had some Zoom parties, Moving Shadow Zoom parties. And those were fun because she would be spinning, she'd have all the participants muted, but people would dress up and get on camera on Zoom and have like these Zoom dance parties. So that like virtual community it's very beautiful. It really has connected the community in a new way. And we can talk about the 80s or the 90s or whatever, like anyone who's been in the scene for a long time says is the good old days all you want, but what's happening right now, I think one day we're going to look back on that and say like, wow, that was really beautiful how that happened. Not why it happened, but how we came together.
And I know for me, because of my disabilities, I haven't gone to a club in years. I think the last time before it got bad was 2018. So it's been years since I've gone to one, but I was on a stream for 2020 into 2021 for New Year's Eve because I'm working now. And in fact, that whole week, my full-time job was like, okay, we're going to have mandatory days off, but we're not paying you, but you're able to work 10 hours a day if you can physically do that to make up for it. Aren't we so awesome? I was just too tired to do a New Year's Eve for 2021 into 2022, but I did my very first virtual Twitch 2020 into 2021, and we all had our little Zoom things on, and the DJ did the countdown for each time zone, and it was just really special. It was so cool. I don't know any of these people in real life. They don't know my real name. They just know Jess and King, and yet we all came together and we physically saw each other. We physically were typing, and it felt really intimate, and it was so cool. And I'm wondering for you, since you have DJ'd in person and also online, do you feel there is a difference from the actual music producing side, like as a DJ curating the night? Does it feel different in person to Twitch, or is it pretty much similar?
It's a different experience, being like Twitch versus like in an actual club. But I think that there are certain things that are very special about the like Twitch aspect that you don't get in a physical club. And one of them is bringing people together from all different locations around the world. I've been able to make friends, and I have friends in other countries that I really very much hope to meet one day. And like, maybe I'll go to like Vigate or one of these music festivals someday and get to meet like some of my friends over in Europe and everything. But that is so cool that on a day-to-day basis, I have friends that I'm close with and I talk to that are in other countries, and I have like that community around the world. And I wouldn't have that if it weren't for like the online. And I am lucky that I have a very great local scene. Like our local scene, our local community is great. The events are great. The people are wonderful. But I know that I'm lucky in that regard, because not everyone has that. Not everyone even has events where they're at. And as you described, not everyone has events where they feel welcome or supported. Not everyone has the ability to go out to clubs for whatever personal circumstances. And it's really wonderful to have that like online experience. It's also a little physically like easier to do like the online like DJing and stuff like that. When I've done like guest DJing online for Twitch streams, I set up, I put in like colored light bulbs in the room that I like DJ out of, and I set up like a full set to kind of do like a designed room for it. But I have a lot of fun with it, and I'm not nearly as physically tired at the end of the night as I would be going out to a physical club. So there are some differences, and there are a lot of benefits that I can get from the online that I can't necessarily get in person.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's really nice that there is such an interconnected online community, and because goth is so niche, I think the community can also be larger coming together online, because are you going to be able to find that many people interested in such a like niche subject matter in like one particular town or city? No, but you can find all the people around the world who have this interest and build like a larger community that way.
That's awesome. Yes.
So for everyone who is watching this, I will link Jess's channel and socials, and I will also link the Facebook group that you mentioned. But we've been talking for over an hour here. Jess, do you have any final thoughts that you want to share with my viewers here? Anyone who maybe hasn't come across your channel before?
I really like where our trajectory went. I think that we talked about the stuff that I think gets lost in the fray with, as we mentioned, these more commercialism channels, which no shade to them, but like we both said, the commercialism wouldn't happen without the core. So I feel we did a really great job. And I think we also did a really great job talking about the past, the present, what might hold to the future. And I really enjoyed our first time, like actually doing a Zoom conversation. It was really awesome. I thank you for inviting me. Hope y'all who are on Kelly's channel enjoyed meeting me for the first time. And yeah, this has been a really great night. Thank you so much.
Oh yeah, thank you for coming on. And again, I will link some of the stuff we talked about in the description. I will link Jess's channel down there, Jess and King on YouTube. Please go subscribe. What she's doing over there is really awesome, and you'll get the chance to hear a lot about a lot of really awesome Black-owned brands. You'll get to hear about obscure and independent artists. Lots of cool stuff over there. So please, everyone, go check that out. Jessica, thank you again so much.
Okay, you guys have a great night.